Okay, we're going to start I didn't explain well the bottom of Kuf Samach Vav on the base. We'll start there at the two dots of Ahu Dahava Kosov Beishis Mezuza. Let's start with our sponsors. Today's daf sponsored by Aryeh and Chani Rosenberg for Zechus of Refuah Shlema for Ephraim Ben Shifra, complete refuah, and also by Mr. Loiterman, father of the Magid Shiur, in honor of the Magid Shiur and the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi program. I'm going to put that in my pocket because I'm going to get like crumply paper sounds through the microphone the whole time. Okay. Here's our story from yesterday. Ahu Dahava Kosev Beishis Vezuza. The star was written, and it says 600 and Azuz. So we didn't know what to make of it because the 600 what, right? We know there's Azuz. We don't know 600 of something. So Rav Shravya, Rav Shravya coming to Abaye. So Rav Shravya sent this star over to Abaye, and he said, Shismeya Istiri Vezuza. Are we going to assume the maximum amount of money? And we'll have 600 and Istri plus Azuz. Or, Dilma Shismeya Pritir. Should we assume it's the minimum amount? And say it's 600 Prutos and Azuz. So Amar Lei, so he said, Dal Prite, don't consider the possibility that it is the smallest value, that it's 600 Prutos. And this is why? Dilo Kasmi Bishtara, because nobody would write 600 Prutos in a star. Why? Imagine that somebody owed 600 pennies, right? You wouldn't write 600 pennies. You'd write $6 because that's not the common currency. So you wouldn't write it in such small, right? We don't have them here, right? But in any event, right? 600, whatever it is, right? You wouldn't even write, 600 nickels, right? That isn't the method that you would write the number. So therefore, that can't be what it means, right? People would total up the value, and it did the math since I was preparing better today. 192 prutos per zuz, which would make it 3 zuzim and 26 prutos. So therefore, that's what you would write in there. You wouldn't write in there, you wouldn't write 600 prutos. So because you'd total it all up and write its equivalent in zuzim. Okay? So, Mayamart, so what are we going to left with? If it's not the lesser amount, what are you going to put? Shismea Istiri, are you going to go with the 600 Istiri, which are a larger quantity, a larger number, Vezuza and Azuz? That you can't do because Yad Bal Hashtar Al Hatachtona, because the owner of the contract is on the, as we said in the Mishnah, is the lower, is at the lower hand, meaning he's the one who has to prove it means the higher thing. He can't prove it, so we don't go with it. So what do we come out with? We come out with a third possibility that's not necessarily listed here, but in the change in Girsa, we read, right, the Marshal erases the parentheses, but the Rashbam points out that what we're going to give to him is, we're going to give him 600 zuz, which is the medium amount, not the lowest, because that doesn't make sense in the contract. The highest we can't give him, but the next lowest currency that makes sense is zuz. So we'd say it was 600 zuz plus 1 zuz. So if he said 600 plus 1 zuz, it's the same thing as writing 601 zuz. That's how we're going to be able to figure out the chart. Now, Amar Abaye says, let's say somebody, he wants to certify his signature in court. Good idea. We have that you do this in banks, right? When I want to be able to sign on my bank documents. So I go and I fill out a signature form in a bank, and then they have my signature on file.
What if you have money that gives your signature on the receipt or whatever?
They do, but now how do they know it's your signature, right? So they move in a bank, they'll make you fill out a signature card. And I don't know whether they ever check anything. I've never seen like anybody pull my signature card out of the file. I wonder if it's computerized now that it does check. But in any event, that's the idea. So a court would check and verify signatures. So let's say you want to be able to you're often a witness, so you want to put on file your signature with Beis Din. Lo lichve besof megilta. Don't ever sign your name at the end of the page. Why? Because Dilma mashkach le acher, somebody might find this piece of paper with your signature on the bottom, the kosav demasik bezuze, and they'll write on the top of the page, I hereby owe so-and-so money. Now, you can't get away with writing a contract because there's no two witnesses, but your own admission you can, for sure, you'd have an obligation to pay. If I admit, if I write, I owe you, $5,000 and sign my name on the bottom, that would be effective. So therefore, if you write your name on the bottom of a piece of paper, somebody might fill in something that is against you on the top of the paper. Therefore, good advice, never sign at the bottom, right? So whenever that's the trick. I'm sorry, my parents are watching, right? But if you want to get if you want to get your parents to sign, right? You want to sign the note for school. I understand my son misbehaved at school. You just, you write something else at the top and then you have your parents sign the bottom, right? I understand, give my child permission to go on the field trip and then they sign the bottom. Then you cut the top off and you can write whatever you want, right? Never sign. Not that I ever did that. I didn't do that. But on the bottom of the contract, you never sign your name on the bottom of a piece of paper. Right? I'm sure they would. I'm sure they would have. I'm sure somebody did it because the Gemara is pointing out not to. Somebody must have, right? Utnan. Now, that we learned in the Mishnah, Hotzia lov ksav yado. If a person, if they bring out a document that has his own handwriting on it, shu chayev lo, that he owes somebody money, gova minechasim bnei chorin, that's enough to collect from the property that he has. Now, it's not enough because it's not a contract. It doesn't have the equivalence of a contract. You can't collect from sold properties, but from, let's say, he could just go into his house and, the basin can collect from the property that he owns. Hahu bizvino de osla kame de Abaye. There was a certain tax collector fellow. Gemara is not fond of tax collectors. Tax collectors are like the evil people. They're like lawyers. Sorry, and the tax collectors had right. Sorry, sorry if you're a lawyer. I'm just at home. Okay, there's a tax collector, and the reason why tax collectors got a bad rap is because the way that they made money is that they would get the rights to collect the taxes, and the king would say collect a certain amount, and whatever they would collect above and beyond that was theirs. That was their salary. So therefore, it was their best interest to collect as much as possible. They had a reputation of not being the most honest folks. So this tax collector comes before Abaye, and he says, "Nechsi li mar chasimus yadei." You know what, Abaye? Can I have a copy of your signature? Because here's what we can do. If you want, I want to be nice to the rabbis. So any of the rabbis who learn well, right, like we'll have a deal that you can write a little note for them and exempt them from taxes. All you got to do is write them a note and sign the bottom. But how am I going to know it's you, Abaye? Therefore, I'm going to ask.
You need a witness.
No, all he's saying is just signature is going to be fine. I'm going to trust the signature, but I just want to be able to know that Abaye is your signature on the bottom. That's right. Remember, it's this guy's own decision to not collect taxes from these people. So therefore, he doesn't need a contract. He's admitting to do it, right? So now, this is what he asks Abaye, can I have a copy of your signature so that I can just know, that you gave permission to let people off, right? Below machsa, I'll pass over them without collecting taxes. So achvile bereish megilta. So Abaye comes along and he does one of these, right? He gives him the contract and he goes to start signing his name at the top of the piece of paper here. And the guy, so what does he do? He says, hava kanogid be. The guy comes and starts pulling the paper like this, so that he's about to sign. It's lower down on the paper, right? And Abaye notices this. Amar Abaye. So Amar Le kvar kadmuch rabbanon. The rabbi's already ahead of you. I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to write my name on the paper or lower down on the paper in order so that you can get me to admit that I owe you money. And
just on you.
Yeah. So Rabbanan already figured that one out, and I am not falling for it. So there's this scam, right? So there was a scam artist back then too, right? They're not all through email. Okay, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Mitlos v'ad eser loksiv besof shita. The numbers 3 until 10 don't end the line with those numbers. Okay? Dilma Mizayef, the kosov, because the person will forge. So here's my example here. I wrote on the end. Now, I didn't know what to write. So this is just, random gobbledygook, but the end is plus, which means 3. And in order to make the number 3 plural in Aramaic or Hebrew, right, all you got to do, that was plus, is you put a yud nun at the end. Now that becomes 30. right? Or I've got this and it says chamesh, and I wrote chamshin, means 50. So I can turn the number 3 to 30 or the number 5 to 50 very easily at the end of a line, and nobody would notice. So therefore, don't ever write numbers at the end of the line. Now, if they're in the middle of a line, it's less of an issue because you have to fit the letters into the contract. Fitting extra letters in is more complicated. It's not so simple. So therefore, he says, don't put these numbers at the end of a line ever. Okay, so that's the good advice. The Iyas Romile. Now, let's say you're a sofer and you're writing along, and it happens to be that the number, right? He owes him $53. He gets to 53, and it's the end of the line. And then he gets the next. So what's he supposed to do now? He doesn't have space. What's he supposed to erase the whole line and start again? What's he going to do? So right from behind the paper. Well, the problem is that you can't end the line with this number at the end of the line anyway. Wherever you're going to put the next sentence isn't the issue. It's what you can't leave at the end of this sentence. So the answer is nihadre ledibure trenu plus a zimna. What you should do is in the contract we repeat ourselves a couple of 2 or 3 times, right? Just keep going and say the loan was $53 from Reuven to Shimon, which was $53, and Reuven lent it to Shimon. And the contract, if you read through a contract, it'll say it 2 or 3 times. Now, if you're writing it over 2 or 3 times, it's impossible that one of the times you write it won't be in the middle of a line. And that way, Beis Din takes a look at it and they see that it's written at the end of a line and the number is different than the one that's at the middle of the line. They're going to presume the middle of the line takes precedence. Okay, so that's the advice. Next, Hahu dahava ksiv be tilsa bit pardisa. There was once a contract, and the contract said that you're going to take 1/3 of my garden in my orchard, right? Bit pardisa, tilsa, 1/3 in my orchard. Azal machke legage de beis vikare. So what the guy did is he erased the top of the bays and also the bottom of the bays. So here's my example here. He's got tilsa bit pardisa, and he takes this and he erases the bottom there and the top there. And now it says tilsa u pardisa, which means that I'm going to give you 1/3 of my garden and the orchard. So now, instead of being 1/3 of the orchard, it turns into the entire orchard. And all that guy had to do was just scrape off the little bit of the bays on the top and the bottom.
Now you lost everything.
So that's right. So now what happens is, also the Kamei d'Abaye, the contract came before Abaye. Amar le, my taima ravach le, alma lahai vav. He says, why is it that there's so much space between the vav and the pei? That looks fishy. That you've got so much space because the bays is much wider letter. Vav is a skinny letter. Why is there enough room by that vav? It's offset. Why is that like that? So kafsei. So he tied him up to a pillar, and Va'odi, and the guy admitted it. Yeah, I did that. Now the way that tying him up to a pillar, right? That was like usually the precursor to getting lashes. So the guy got a little intimidated, right? And so he said, yeah, that's what I did. That's correct. Scared him, and then he admitted that he did it. Ahu dehava kosav bay manos Ruvain v'Shimon ache. There was a person who said that he is collecting the portion, he's buying in this contract, the portion of Ruvain and Shimon, the brothers. Ruvain and Shimon brothers. Okay? So hava lahu acha shmei achi. Turns out Ruvain and Shimon had another brother, and their third brother's name was Achi. Right? It's a nice name to name your brother, right? Your brother's name was Bro, right? And so that happened to be their name. Okay? So this is what the guy does. Here's the contract. Ruvain v'Shimon Achi, right? Ruvain and Shimon, who are brothers. Wait for that a little bit. I gotta get good at this. Right? Ruvain and Shimon Achi. I got better, my handwriting got better as I went down. Ruvain v'Shimon Achi, right? So what does this guy do? He comes along and he puts a vav right there.
And my brother.
Ruvain, Shimon, ve'achi. I bought the land of Ruvain, Shimon, and Achi. So now that gives him a whole bunch more property than he was otherwise deserving. Okay? Now, what gives Abaye the idea that these are forged? Remember, the other guy's coming along and saying that's not what the contract said, right? So there's already a little bit, like, he's not just tying people up. Well, that's what we're going to see here. So this is what they did. So what happens is, also Kame Dabai, this contract comes before Abaye. Omar Lay says, my time adochikle alma lahayvav kule hai. Why is it that it's so tight? There's no space here between Reuven, Shimon, and Achi. The space is so tight here because he threw the vav into the space between the names. So Kafteh, so he tied him up. But Odi and the guy admitted that he had forged it. So now again, like I said, just randomly tying people up in order to force them to, right? He had to have believed the other fellow was saying, the other two guys were saying that Achi wasn't part of the contract. And then he took a look at the contract and went, yeah, I see what you're saying. There's no space there. And so therefore, then that's what helped him to admit it. Okay. Now, make a little extra space. I suppose that you have to have. So that you could, by the way, and that we said that you could do, right? If the shtar, we said that they left lines in between. If the sofer had put, then you're better off doing that, than just to shove it in here, right? Then that would have been sounds from the previous Gemaras that this would have been better than to do it as long. But what would we have to have done if we did that? We would have had to at the bottom of the contract write at the end. We also made a change to the contract by adding a vav before va'achi, before they signed the witnesses. So it'd still have to have it someplace in the contract indicated, but this wasn't indicated that way, and so the whole thing was very suspicious, right? So that's what. So they tied him up. There was a contract that the signatures on the contract were Rava and Rav Acha bar Ada. Also lekami de Rava, so they came before Rava. Amar le dein chasimus yada didi. He says, I'm looking at this signature. It looks like it's my signature, right? They came and they said, is this your signature? He looked at it and went, this looks like my signature. But mihu kami de Rav Acha bar Ada lo chasimi li meolam. I never ever signed any contract with Rav Acha bar Ada. So I would have known, I would have remembered, I guess it's signing with a famous person. I never have to have a signature with me and, and the Rebbe. I would have remembered, right? I would have remembered that I would have remembered being there, having that, but nope, I never signed on a contract. So it looks like my signature, but it can't be my signature because this never happened. Kafteh, so they tied him up, the OD, and he admitted that he forged the signatures. He was just a very good forger. Now, Amar Le, so he said to him, I understand you're a very good forger, and you forged my signature. That was very nice. Well done. Good work. Ela de Rav Acha bar Ada, but forging Rav Acha bar Ada's signature was very difficult. Why? Dirosis yadeh. His hand was shook, right? He had a shaky hand. So his signature, right, was much more, all shaky, right? So if his signature is all shaky, how'd you forge that, right? Because your hand doesn't shake. So how are you going to forge it if you just pretend your hand is shaking? It doesn't work so well. So I guess it's curiosity. So the guy, yeah, it's well, that's because it's shaky, right? Okay. So Amar Anchi Yadai Amatzra. One says that he went to a rope bridge that are very shaky, and he put his hand on the rope bridge when he signed, and the bridge shook, and therefore he had shaky hand. The Amrila, and some said, "Kam azarnuka uksav," that he used the utensil that I guess that you stand on in order to draw water from the well, and I guess that was also a shaky board or something like that. That was these are basically very shaky. He was either standing on something, put his hand on something very shaky, and that is what created the motion that made it very shaky. Yeah, that doesn't say, right? So that was the method of forgery. Okay, new Mishnah. Kosvin get leish afal pi she'ein ish doimo. You can write a get for a man even though his wife is not present, even though she's not there. V'ashover liisha, you can write a receipt. For a woman, she is writing a receipt to her husband saying, I received my my ksuba, right? He doesn't want to pay the ksuba, right? Unless she provides some kind of receipt back. So we write the receipt to her, even though the husband's not there. Makiran. The only thing is, you have to recognize them. Let's see who them is. We'll see that in the Gemara. V'habal nosein schar, and the husband pays for the documents here. The husband is the one who pays for the get. The husband is the one who pays for the receipt. We'll see. The Gemara is going to explain why is it, right? You have what do you call it? Filing fees, documentation fees here, right? The sofer's got to get paid, so they're the ones. He's the one who pays. Kosvin shtar lelova afal peshein she'ein mal ve'imo. You can write a contract for the borrower, right? Because the borrower is saying, I borrowed money, so he's admitting it. Even if the lender is not present at the writing, but you can't write the contract for the lender without the borrower there, because the lender could be saying something that's not true about the loan, right? So you can't take that. And the person who has to pay is the borrower. Now we're going to see that essentially the way you know who pays is whoever is the one who's getting the benefit out of this deal, right? Since I'm borrowing the money, the responsibility of writing the contract is on me, because that's to my benefit that I'm borrowing the money, right?
All the money they borrow from someone, you got rid of it.
Well, no, because you're going to borrow more money than it takes to pay the sofer. Hopefully you're not paying the sofer like $1,000, right? So the sofer should make up for, a few dollars for writing it out, and then that's how you're going to do it. Kosvin shtar lemocher, right? We're going to write a contract for the seller, somebody who sells something, afa pishein lokeach imo, even though the purchaser is not there. Vein kosvin lokeach ad shein mocher imo, but you can't write for the purchaser unless the seller is there, because we have to be very clear as to what's being sold. Okay. The halokeach nosein schar, and the purchaser is the one who has to pay for it. The purchaser pays for it. Ein kosvin shtari erusin v'nesuin elamidas shneim. You don't write contracts of erusin or for nesuin unless both of the husband and wife are both present and accepting it. Now, what is a shtar erusin? What's a shtar nesuin? What are these things? These are not the actual documents that they would use to get married with. This is not a shtar. We usually, like in the execution, we say that a marriage, you can write a contract. I hereby am being married through this contract. That's not this contract. This is the erusin contract, which we call tanayim nowadays, which is the contract before the marriage, which says that I hereby agree that we're going to show up at the wedding and I'm going to provide this and this gift, and we're not going to back out of it. And that's the shtar erusin.
You do that shtar a week before the wedding, or a week of the wedding?
They used to do it a year before, right? They used to do it. Now we do it an hour before, right? They used to do it a long time before, right? And the nesuin, right? The contract of nesuin was likewise, right? Was not the marriage contract, but the ksuba, right? So the ksuba has to be done because you're going to write in there what each one is obligated to do. So therefore, they both have to be aware of it, right? The chasan nosein schar, and the chasan is the one who pays for it, right? And that's still customary now, right? With the wedding, the Masada Kedushin tells the chasan, go to the bookstore and get yourself a ksuba. The chasan is the one who pays for the ksuba. Okay. Ein kosvin shtar erusin v'kablonus el midas shnehem. We're not going to be able to write a contract of sharecropping or what do we call that? Percentage? I guess a percentage farming or whatever that is. But the idea is essentially one guy's a landowner and he doesn't do the work on his field. What he does, he hires workers to work the field. But the worker that he hires a foreman. There's two ways to pay the foreman. Three ways to pay the foreman. No, not with money, but like one way to pay the foreman is just to give him money and say, hi, you work for me, and give him a salary. But that was generally not the method, right? What they would do is they would pay by saying, you're going to take a percentage of the crops, right? So you'll earn 20% of the crops of the produce from the field, and then you'll be able to work my field, right? So that is, right? That's called arisos, and kablanus is the agreement to be able to receive a set amount for the work on the field. right? When you successfully work the field, then as a result, you're going to receive, X payment, not an annual payment, whatever, but for an exchange for working in the field, you're going to receive blank payments.
Not a percentage.
Not a percentage, right? The percentage is the risus, and kablonis is a set amount. Okay, so and you need to be able to have both of them present because it's a requirement that both of them agree to this deal and understand the agreement. The hamakabel nosein schar, the one who's the receiver, right? The one who is the worker is the one who has to pay for the contract to be signed. Ein kosvin shtari beirurin, the chomasa based in. You're not allowed to write the contracts called beirurin. The Gemara is going to explain what those are, or any act of based in el midas shnehem, unless both of the parties are present and agree to it. Ushnehem nosim schar, and both of them have to pay for what they're doing. We'll see what they are, and then we'll understand why it is that it benefits both of them. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "L'shnehem kosvin shnayim lezeh la'atzmo v'lezeh la'atzmo." He says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, we're going to write two different contracts. When based in is establishing and writing these beirurin, we're going to write one copy for the defendant, one copy for the plaintiff, and each of them are going to pay for their own copies. So that's how it's going to be. It's not going to be one copy that we're going to share. We're going to each have our own separate one, and each one has to therefore pay for their own. Okay, so that's what the Mishnah says. Now we're going to learn the details. Says the Gemara. My ubilvaji he makiron. What does that mean when we said that we're going to write a divorce for the husband and we're going to write the receipt for the lady, right? But the only thing is we have to recognize them. So who's them? Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, ubilvaji and makir shem ha'ish beget v'shem ha'isha b'shover. You have to be able to recognize this guy's name in the get, so you know that it's for him, and the name of the woman in the receipt, so that we know it's for her. Why? What are we worried about? Well, yep.
Made a big one.
So he's not going. What's going to happen is we're going to make a real one, which is a scam, right? The guy's going to show up and he's going to say, "Yeah, my name is Moshe and I'm divorcing my wife Sarah," but that's not the guy's name. That's not his wife. But then what does he do? He takes this get, runs over to Sarah, and he says, "Remember, your husband's trying to give you a get, and you wouldn't get one. So here, take this. This is now, you can use this get."
Not kosher.
Right? It is not kosher. She knows it, so she probably won't get remarried with it. But you know what she could do with it is she could show up to Beis Din and say, "Look, he gave me a get, but there's no, but I still have my, but he still has, I still have the ksuba, so he owes me. I can use it to collect my ksuba."
Did you sue him for that?
Well, yes, but she needs proof that she's divorced. She can't get the ksuba unless she has proof that she's divorced. So therefore, we can create some kind of not even a forgery. It's a real Beis Din authorized get that then can be handed off to the wrong people. So therefore, we have to be able to make sure that this contract is, in fact, a get that belongs to this person. Okay, so that's what we know. Yosef Rav Safra of Rav Acha Bar Huna. So Rav Safra and Rav Acha Bar Huna was sitting, and Rav Huna Bar Chinana, and Rav Huna Bar Chinana was there too. V'Yosef Abaye Gabaye, and Abaye was leading this group discussion. Right, they were having their shiur like this, and Abaye was there. V'Yosef v'Kama Bailu, and they were sitting, and he asked them the following question: Shema ish beget in Shema ish alo. He says you only have to recognize the name of the guy, but not the girl. Right? Shema isha b'shover in Shema ish lo. You only need to worry about the name of the woman in the receipt, because it's the same thing, right? Because if we don't know the name of the woman, so then she could be writing it for somebody else, go run around and give it to another guy and say that you've got you've got a receipt that indicates you already paid your ksuba. So now when your wife comes to collect your ksuba, you can use this, right? So, but why wouldn't you need the name of the woman? But lechush, why shouldn't we be concerned? Dilma kosav gita the ozel umanti le say deheich. Well, maybe what he'll do is he'll take this and he'll write the name of the wrong woman, but he has the same name as the husband, so it still works the same way, right? So they'll recognize that. Let's say Yosef needs to get a get to be able to, this woman Sarah needs to get a get from her husband Yosef. She'll go to another guy named Yosef and say, go get a get, right? And so they'll write it and they'll prove he'll know his name, but he'll still be able to use it as a fake one for this other marriage and give it to this woman by lying about the name of the wife. So why don't we need both? The Zimnin Ozlight a receipt, the Yava Legavra Dilav Dilah, and she'll give it over to a guy that is not her husband, and they'll use it as a fake. So Amar Lahu Abaye. So this is what Abaye said to them. Hachi Amar Rav. Rav explained as follows: Shema Ish beget v'hu adin l'Shema Isha. You have to, not only the Mishnah means, you have to recognize the name of the husband and the wife. Okay, you need the husband and the wife's name. That way, otherwise, you're right, it's too easy for you to find a guy who has the same name in order to be able to make a fake get. You need to have the guy, you need to have the guy and the wife, and you have to recognize the name. The wife doesn't have to be present at the writing, but you have to be able to recognize and know that is in fact his wife's name.
What is hasn't been a champion where the wife has the same name as someone else?
You mean the husband and the wife?
No, the wife.
Yes.
Has one name, and then the husband.
But remember, as long as we're checking, we know this is the husband's name, right? We make him show ID in court, so we know that he is him.
Even if there's another girl who has the same Hebrew name,
that's not going to bother us because he is the one who's going to be on the get, right? Right? He's being checked. Once he's being checked, right? We don't have to worry about. But now we do have to worry about her being a falsehood too. So now we know him and her. Shem ha'isha b'shover v'uadila shem ha'ish. So too, right? The name of the woman on the contract. We also need to know the husband's name, and that's way we won't be worried that it'll get passed around. Okay? Well, we still have a problem. V'leichush l'shnei Yosef ben Shimon hadarim bir achas. How do you know there won't be two guys named Yosef ben Shimon who have the same name, their wives have the same name in the same city, right? So it could happen, right? So two guys, you don't think there's two guys in the entire city of Toronto that don't have the same name, and maybe and the wife is the same name? It could happen. So therefore, what'll happen is Dilma Ksiv Gita. What'll happen is one of the guys will go and do it. This lady is having problems with her husband. He won't give a get. She wants to go and collect the money for the ksuba. So she'll go to the other guy who has the same name as his wife and say, do me a favor, go to Basin. You get a get with my name and my husband's name on it. They'll check your name and your wife's name, but it'll check out because you have the same name and your wife has the same name. So it'll all check out. You'll get a get from the Basin, come back and give it to me. Then I will use the get, take my husband to court. He's going to say, what are you talking about? We never got divorced. And I'll pull out the contract signed by Basin says we were divorced.
Easier said than done.
Well, if she happens to be lucky enough to have a husband who has the same name as another guy who has the same name, who has a wife of the same name as her, then she could pull it off. So what are we going to do about that? Right? We're trying to figure out all ways to prevent any of these from lying. Yeah. You could get lashes for these things. So here's what he says. So this is what they say to do. So, Amar lehu Rav Acha bar Huna. Rav Acha bar Huna says as follows. Haki Amar Rav. This is what Rav says to prevent this problem. Shnei Yosef ben Shimon hadorim bi'ir achas. If you've got two guys named Yosef ben Shimon that live in one city, ein megarshin nishosehen ela zeh b'fnei zeh. If you know, and they would, because I guess they would realize that this was some kind of a fluke circumstance that they had two guys with the same name who married women with the same name. If one of them gets divorced, one of them divorces his wife, you invite the other couple to be present at the divorce so that nobody can claim that something happened, right? It was the other couple that this happened to, not us, right? They're both present. We know which one got divorced and which one did not. That way, we're clear. Okay? So that was the solution. Okay. Good enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But here's another thing. Back in those days, before they could do their computer fingerprinting, or you had a Canada-wide ID, right? So how did they know who anybody was, right? Their signature. People in the town would say, "I know you. You're so and so," and they would have witnesses. So what is this person going to do? Maybe let's be concerned. Dimel azil lemasa achrisa. This guy, in order to be able to help out this poor lady who is needing a get, he'll go to another city where nobody knows him. Umachzik le lishmei be Yosef ben Shimon. And whenever anybody asks him, "What's your name?" he'll tell everybody, "My name's Yosef ben Shimon." After a while, he'll find two people around the city who say, "This is Yosef ben Shimon." And then he'll be able to go to court and get a document that says Yosef ben Shimon on it. And as far as anybody saying that they're aware that somebody else has the same name as the husband and the wife, that's not going to happen because it's not in the same city. So maybe that's what he'll do. Uksiv gita, they'll write a get. Umamti le li'itisei, and then they'll give it to it, and then he'll give it to his wife, right? To Deich, he'll give it to the wife of the other guy. So what are we going to do about that? So Amar Luhu Rav Huna bar Chinna. Now Rav Huna bar Chinna says, Hachiyam Rav, this is how Rav said to worry about that. Kol shehuchzak shmo be'ir shloshim yom, ein choshishin lo. If somebody has 30 days, if he's using that name in a city for 30 days, we presume that's really his name. Why? People travel around, and the guy's not going to be able to pull off this scam. If he's in the city, sure, you can come in for one day, and then people can ask you your name, and you'll say Yosef and Shimon. That's great. But if you're going around the Jewish community, and you're there for 30 days, somebody from the next town over is going to come visit, and is going to say, hey, Chaim, how you doing? So he's not going to be able to pull this off for more than 30 days. So therefore, all you got to do is make sure the guy's there for 30 days. If his identity holds up for 30 days, that's okay. But less than 30 days, you can't. So it sounds like less than 30 days, you can't. So, okay. Lo is chazik mai. So now the question is, let's say he hasn't been there 30 days. The guy goes to court. He wants to write a get. He hasn't been there for 30 days. He says, this is my name. So what do you do then? So Amar Abaye says, here's what you do. You sneak up on him and say, hey, Yosef. And if he turns around and says, what? You know it's him. Right? That's a good way to know, right?
Yeah.
Right? Rav Zvid says, Ramah beramuse zahir. He says, no, you don't understand scam artists. Scam artists practice. Right? They're not going to fall for that. They're practice. They're going to be called by the name. They're not going. So therefore, he says less than 30 days, you just can't write the get. You gotta wait. You gotta wait till he's been verified. Right? That's till the verification process finishes. That's how they do it. Okay, good.
Yep.
Hahu Tavra dehava chosim Allah Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. So there was a contract that had Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba's signature on it. Asya lekame hahi itisa. So a certain lady comes along and she says Amra le, and she says Lav ona havai. This contract, this was a receipt for a ksuba. So essentially what happened was that this woman got divorced and she says, I want my ksuba. And the husband says, I have a receipt. The receipt shows I paid. Whose signature is on it? None other than Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. Is that where it was? No. Yeah, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. His signature's on the document. Okay? So she comes along and she says, I see the document, but that's not me. That person in the contract, it's not me. I never. So he said, Amar, Ananami Amri Luhu Lav Ihi. You're right. I took a look at this contract and I see you, and you don't look like the person that I signed the contract for. I remember who I signed the contract for. You don't look like her. Okay? V'amruli, but you know what they told me? They told me, Makish hu dekashala ubagar lakala. She got older and her voice got deeper. So you don't remember her, but it's her. So therefore, I'm going to go with it's you. And that was certified. He said, I can't. So Amar Abaye says, Afal gav de Amar Rabbanon, Kevon shehigid shuv eno chozer magid. Now, the rule is when you give testimony, a witness is not allowed to change his testimony. So once he says, this is my testimony, he can't go back to Basin and change his testimony. That looks very suspicious. So the rule is one testimony per customer per case. Okay. So what are we doing here? Because Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba came along and said, that's not the lady that I signed for. And then he goes back into Basin and they told him, it's her. She just didn't age well. So then he comes back and he goes, hey, you know what? The guys outside told me it's really her. So then, how's he able to change his testimony? So the answer is, Surba me Rabbanan lav urche lemedak. The answer is, rabbinic scholars, they don't recognize ladies. They're not paying attention. They don't recognize, not hanging around with ladies enough. So they don't pay attention. This is a common mistake. That's what the Rashbam says. The rule by not having somebody change their testimony is that it's where there's a real change in testimony. If there's a real change in testimony, that you can't do. But If there's a common mistake, a common misunderstanding, and you get corrected by a common misunderstanding, then that's okay, right? Common misunderstanding, you didn't see, this part of it you didn't understand, you didn't see, that's not changing it. So again, he thought this wasn't her. Turns out it was her. He got corrected. He's no expert on ladies. Therefore, that's okay. Now, next case. There was another case where there was a receipt and Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba's name is signed on it. He signed on this document saying that she got her ksuba payment. Amrale, she says to him, Lav anahava, that wasn't me. It never happened. I never got it. Amar la, he said to her, Ibra ant havis. No, I'm very clear. It was you. Now, we have a problem, because Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, we just said, doesn't recognize ladies. Now, all of a sudden, he recognizes the ladies.
Did it tie her up?
No, that was a bias based, different based in. So he says, Amar Abaye, now Abaye's back, right? Amar Abaye says, Afal Gav, the Tzur Rabbanon, even though we normally say that young Torah scholars, that the Torah, not young, but any Torah scholars, even though we say that Torah scholars, Lav Urche Lemeduk, that they don't normally notice the ladies, Kavon de duck. If they do, though, then they do, right? They may not go around recognizing all the women, but one that they do recognize, they recognize. That's the way that it is. So therefore, if he said, no, I know it's you, that is good. That's good testimony, and that's fine. Amar Abaye says, Hi Tzurban Rabbanan to Ozul Kedusha Itisa. Good advice now. Good advice. If you are a rabbinic scholar and you are going to get married, right? So then Nidbar im Am Haaretz Badeh. Go to meet the lady and bring an Am Haaretz with you. You got to bring a non-Torah scholar with you. Why? Because somebody might try to switch the ladies on you. And so you need to bring somebody who's used to recognizing ladies. So this doesn't happen, right? Now it's kind of an amusing Gemara. So First of all, is it proper that you're not supposed to recognize the ladies? Is that what the point is? And if that is the case, how is he being violating Lifnei Iver? You know what? I don't pay attention to women, but I see you're really good at looking at ladies. I'm going to bring you with me, right? But who gave this guy permission to be that way, right? If it's not tznius to do it, it's not tznius to do it. So then why is the rabbi allowed to bring, right? You imagine this is, your rabbi comes over to you and goes, hey, Jeff, could you do me a favor? I'm meeting a bank manager and she's a woman. I just want to make sure that I have the right lady. Could you come with me? You're really good at, right. That's, right. What gives you the right to do that, right?
Maybe he's not from her. Maybe they're not Jewish.
It's an Amaretz. He's Jewish. He's just not. Well, here's not even horror. You're just inviting a guy, right? That's why I'm bringing you along for this reason. So it is an interesting thing. So first of all, to note that the Rambam writes that it is appropriate for a person who is going to get married to go out with a woman and look at the woman and decide if he finds her attractive before they get married. That is not only mutter, that is appropriate and what is proper to do. The Ravid argues with the Rambam and cites this Gemara. He says, not necessarily so, right? But they have this argument and the discussion. Now, we hold that is a good thing to do, right? This is what we do. This is just a practical situation. A guy who spends all of his time in the base medrash doesn't know the ladies around town and can't recognize or whatever. So he's just not used to the differences between this lady and this lady. So he's not going to be aware. That's not to say that there's a prohibition against it, but somebody who's out in the workforce and knows the different ladies and their hairstyles and things finds it easier to be able to recognize the distinction between them, right? So therefore, that's the good advice, right? Good advice. Okay. The habal nosein schar. Now we said that whoever's going to be the one who benefits from the contract, that's the one who's got to pay. That's what we said. So the first example in the Mishnah of the contract was the husband paying for the get and the husband also paying for the receipt for the ksuba. So my time, what is the reason why the husband is the one who's responsible for pay for the get? So the answer is the Amar Kra. This one isn't because the husband is benefiting. This is because there's no benefit. Nobody likes the divorce, but nevertheless, the pasuk says, "V'kasav v'nasan." He writes the get and he gives the get. Whose responsibility is it to write the get? The husband. The Torah says, husband writes the get. Now, he's not a sofer, so he hires somebody else to write it, but you can hire a shliach to perform this for you that you're not expert in doing. Otherwise, bris milah becomes very difficult, right? Shchita would be a mess. So therefore, you can clearly assign somebody the responsibility to take care of a mitzvah for you, so you can hire the sofer. But the mitzvah, the requirement of writing the get, is on the husband. V'ha'idna delo avdinan hachi. So why is it that we don't do that nowadays? Nowadays, the beis din is not paid by the man. Now, I don't know. I've never said I did my one day, and I didn't ask who was paying. I did one day of gittin that we had. Like, they brought somebody into Vancouver, and like two of us were there signing divorce contracts that day. So I didn't know who was paying. So I presume that the Gemara says that we don't have the husband pay nowadays. Why? So Shadu ad Rabbanan Aisha, the Rabbanan said, you know what, the woman should pay, ki heicha gelo l'shayeh, because we won't want to give the husband any excuse for delaying, right? The husband says, I'll give you a get, but what is it, $10? I don't have $10 on me, forget it. So you know what we say? We're not going to get it started. The woman will pay for it. So that's how that works. The husband still has to make the sofer the shliach. Okay, kotzvin shtar leloveh, afal pi she'ein milveh imo. Then we say that we're going to write, obviously, the one with the receipt on the ksuba, that's obvious and easy because the husband's getting the benefit of the receipt. He doesn't have to pay the shtar. He's not going to pay the ksuba twice. So that's why he has to pay that one. The next one is we write a document of a loan document with the lender present. I'm sorry, with the borrower present, even though the lender is not present. So that and the person who pays for it is the borrower. Okay, now that's pshita. That's obvious. Why does Mishnah have to tell me that? Clearly, the person who's getting the benefit is the borrower, and it has to be the borrower who is present because the borrower is the one who is being obligated to pay back by this contract. So he's the one who has to be present when it's being written. Okay, so why do we have to say this? So the answer is lo tzricha be'iska. We need this because this is not a straight case of a loan. This is even in a case of something called iska. What is iska? Iska is a business deal, right? That's what the asek means, business. And the business deal works like this. One guy he's an investor, okay? And then he finds somebody who he thinks is a good salesperson. So he goes to the salesperson and he says, here's what we're going to do. I'll give you the money, right? And you will take the money, you will buy an object. And then you will go sell that object for more money.